This is In Character. I'm your host, Gerard Robinson, Vice President for Education at the Advanced Studies in Culture Foundation. Hello, everyone. My name is Gerard Robinson. I'm the Vice President for Education at the Advanced Studies in Culture Foundation and a Fellow of Practice at the Institute for Advanced Studies at the University of Virginia. This is our first In Character conversation that we've had for year 2022, and I can't think of any better topic to start off 2022. As many of you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, this is an opportunity for us as professionals to congratulate one another, to talk about what's taking place in our field. I had a chance, in fact, a couple of weeks ago to say hello to my 86-year-old fourth grade teacher who I saw in person and had a chance to introduce my family to. So I am a beneficiary of a great teacher, several of them, but one in particular. So we're here, as you know, in Character Conversations to talk with people who are in the field. We have current classroom teachers, we have former classroom teachers, we have researchers who are involved in working with educators to talk about salary, to talk about retention. We have those who work for nonprofit organizations who are also in the business to make sure we learn best practices. So we have a nice mix of educators. I'm using that term broadly because people work inside and outside the classroom in leadership positions, and others broadly in the area of nonprofit work, but also inside the classroom. So with that, I want to welcome all of you to our viewing audience. Some of you have seen some faces here before. Others, this is their first time here, so welcome. So what I really want to do is just do a quick round robin. Just tell us first and last name, where you're located, and your current position. And then after that, we will go into the first question. So I'm going to start with Mark on, at least on my left, and we'll work our way over.
Sounds good. My name is Mark Mueller. I am a Wisconsin Teacher of the Year and a former Wisconsin Teacher of the Year coordinator, but my role currently is to work for Tropicana Brands Group as the organizational capacity manager, in Bradenton, Florida, where I help grow an entire community through education, but in the private sector, not in public schools.
All right, let's go to Daniel.
Yes, I'm Daniel Leija. I'm here at the Northside Independent School District in San Antonio, Texas. I'm an elementary school teacher, and I'm in a brand new, it's a fledgling program that now is a elementary STEM teacher serving kindergarten through fifth grade. And it's a great program, really enjoying it, and it's kind of breathed new life into my teaching.
Great, and if memory serves me correctly, you're part of the Troops to Teacher cohort.
Yes, sir. I'm a mentor teacher for the Troops to Teacher. I've been doing that for years. Matter of fact, I'm in contact with a young gentleman right now who's just getting ready to separate. He just finished up, and we're in the process of helping with his job hunting.
Sounds good. Let's go to Peggy.
Hello, everyone, and happy Teacher Appreciation Week. I'm Peggy Brookins. I'm the President and CEO of the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. I'm also a board certified teacher and retired STEM educator from the state of Florida.
Great. In fact, last time I had a chance to see Peggy in person was in Washington, D.C., where she brought together a group of educators of color to have them work and do more work leading to board certification. So always good to see you. Let's go to Tammy. Good to see you.
So my name is Tammy Tiang. I'm a special education teacher in Dulce, New Mexico. It's in very rural northern New Mexico. I've been teaching here for 20 years. I've spent part of that time at the elementary level, part at the high school, and some at middle school. I'm currently back at the elementary, so I've sort of come full circle. But happy Teacher Appreciation Week to everybody here, and I'm happy to be part of this discussion.
It's always good to have someone from New Mexico on call. Let's go to Sheena. Good to see you as well.
I am Sheila Graham. I'm Connecticut's 2019 Teacher of the Year, and I'm recently retired as of January. I've completed 39 years in music education, both elementary and high school.
Now, what she's not telling you is, yes, she retired for 39 years, but she started teaching at 12. So glad for your retirement. Look forward to having conversations about what you're doing now, because as an educator, you may retire, but you still have one foot in the field one way or another. Let's go to Kareem.
Hi, my name is Kareem Neal. I teach high school self-contained special education. This is my 23rd or 24th year. I lost track. I teach at Maryville High School in the Phoenix Union High School District. I was the 2019 Arizona Teacher of the Year, and just a couple of weeks ago was named the first Arizona teacher in the National Teachers Hall of Fame. So that was pretty exciting.
Oh, congratulations.
And I'm also on a national board with Peggy.
Right. Nice. Congratulations. We'll dive a little deeper into that when we get to your work. So, Ellen, tell us who you are.
Sorry. Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me here. I'm Ellen Sherratt, and I'm based in Chicago and working as the board president for the Teacher Salary Project.
Thank you for joining us. I believe it's your first time we've had you on the show. So glad that we have you here. All right. And last but surely not least, we have Megan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Conklin. I'm also based in Chicago. I'm the Director of Insights and Analytics, which is a title I made up, but really just is a fancy way of saying researcher at Upbeat. And I've been with them for about 6 months now. Prior to that, I was a teacher and all sorts of other things in the field of education.
Glad to have you on board as well. So, two people from Chicago. My wife, I took her to her first Taste of Chicago event 18 years ago. And so when she hears Chicago, it's always good memories there. So let me just throw it open to the group. You all know this is National Teacher Appreciation Week. Why do we need this week? Jump in as you like.
I think this year more than ever, Teachers Appreciation Week is needed. It's a great way of uplifting the profession, and for everyone that's taking part as an educator or working on behalf of education, it's just great to take a moment and stop and realize the importance of what educators do. So I think that's why it's so important to have Teacher Appreciation Week.
Okay.
I think people would say every day should be Teacher Appreciation Day. And, we have this week, but just to, talk about what teachers do on a daily basis and what you've had to do just exhausted in the last couple of years, but never giving up. And with a focus constantly on students, they need a lot of pampering and appreciation.
I think Teacher Appreciation Week has two very needed outcomes. The first being that symbolic recognition of the fact that people have done a great job and that we should uphold our teachers and hold them in high regard and appreciate them in that symbolic, positive way. But I think that Teacher Appreciation Week also serves a really important purpose in calling the issues of teachers back into a public dialogue and discourse. I think a lot of times Teacher Appreciation Week gets overrun with the happy, fluffy, positive stuff. And it sometimes gets a little bit in the way of having those really important contextual conversations of what it's really like to be a teacher in the trenches and what it's really like to take on the myriad number of things that teachers do have to take on. So it's a really important second piece to have that invitation to those conversations.
And I will also add, along with the, Mark, I hear what you're saying, and I totally agree. But it's also nice to have that little kind of a bit of the fluffy, positive, happy thing too, because I do tend to think that sometimes people maybe forget that teachers exist except when there's something negative that happens in the news. So just a little reminder, especially for maybe some of us that don't fall under the categories of some of the other holidays.
I was going to say the same thing as a data person. I was going to bring up the recent, I'm probably taking the words right out of your mouth, Megan, but the recent Merrimack National Teacher Survey showed that teacher satisfaction is at an all-time low of 12%, 12% of teachers being very satisfied with their job. That's down by so much. It generally hovered around like 50, in the 50% range, and then dropped to 39% in 2019. 2008, and everyone was sounding the alarm bells then. Now we've dropped from 39% to 12% who are very satisfied. So we have to do everything, the fluffy things and the very serious discussions to turn that around.
Yeah, and specifically with appreciation data, it's so important to have weeks like this and days like this, and even continue throughout the year to appreciate teachers. On our most recent survey, 25% of teachers reported that they did not receive recognition and did not feel appreciated in their school. So it's very important that we focus on that, and having a teacher appreciation week is a great time to draw attention to it and support administrators in helping with that.
The others. So we know 1984, we saw National Teacher Day. We know even before 1984, there were different celebrations, and as time moved on, it became a full week. When we had in-character conversations during 2021, people were telling us very different things, how much not only the pandemic had impacted the profession, but how much the educators themselves said they were impacted by not only the workload, but just the dynamics of being a teacher at this point in American history. And so there are some terms like the great exit or the great exodus, teachers are leaving. Some say that it's great anxiety. Some teachers are staying, but still saying, I'm just not sure. 300,000 openings, high number of paraprofessionals coming in, the whole political dynamic now of how with the role of parents versus the role of teachers. So there's a lot going on right now. What do you hear being real versus rhetoric? And what are we missing? And more importantly, what are you hearing and how are you feeling at this moment? Open to anyone who wants to jump in.
I think one of the things that people were missing was that, like, during pandemic time, I thought it was two things. One, we had a chance to connect with parents and communities like we didn't before, so that was like a positive. But one of the things that was tricky was we were kind of hearing the world, a lot of the world, talking about whether we were lazy or whatever the case may have been, while we were like learning a new way to do our job. You know what I'm saying? And I think about particularly, it sounds like a lot of teachers here have been teaching for a long time as well. When COVID started, it was my 21st year teaching, and I felt like a brand new teacher. All the while hearing half the world saying that I didn't want to work, or we didn't want to work. So I thought it was a really big positive in that we had a different way to connect with parents, particularly for folks in special ed or folks probably in elementary. But also, I think that the tough part and what I think might have contributed to driving some of those people out was like, we were all like, man, we feel like we're, this is our toughest year and everybody's telling us we're lazy.
Sure.
I'm going to have to chime in. The way I see it, in the United States, we have short memories in this country, and that works against us. I'm going to give you an example. When the Twin Towers were hit on 9/11, you could not find one unpatriotic person in this country. Everybody gelled together. They pulled together. USA. You had young people that were joining the military, in droves. I mean, it was amazing because everybody wanted to do their part. They wanted to protect America. But then, about 2013, 2014, it wasn't in the limelight anymore. It wasn't the cool thing to do. And so we just kind of, started moving away from that. And now you mentioned 9/11, and it's like, who cares? Let's look at the pandemic, pre-pandemic. It was the thing. It was the mob thing to do was to, pick on teachers and all the negative things about teachers and this and that. But when COVID hit, and all of a sudden these parents were faced with having their kid home behind a computer and they had to be on them about getting online, having that camera going and being behind that. All of a sudden, oh my gosh, they were like, man, teachers are the greatest. I can't believe that they have to work through this. This is amazing. We had all the support in the world, but now that we're back and the mask mandates have been lifted and you've got kids back in school, it's going right back to where it was. I mean, we're a very short-sighted nation, and that's what I see as a major problem.
Piggybacking on what has been said already, I think a lot of teachers were ill prepared for what was thrown at them. Mm-hmm. And trying to get support locally or at their school, they were disappointed that they didn't get that type of support. They were told to do things like, take your in-class virtually online. It doesn't work that way. So leadership was a problem for a number of folks in that they felt like they weren't being led. They weren't being told exactly, what needed to happen and how, or what the expectations were even of students. And then you had, kind of a back and forth between different levels, between parents about what the expectations are. If they had technology, some, states said, we don't even have technology, so we're not doing anything at all. So those children lost out totally. And there was, the inequity that we already knew was there really came to the forefront in ways that we saw all of us, children, suffer in ways that they should not have.
And thank you so much for bringing up the part of leadership, because when teachers go through, not all, but some exit interviews, one of the things they mentioned as a factor of why they were leaving either that school or profession was leadership. And there are a number of foundations who are doing money on what can we do for leaders to put them in a better role. So I'm glad you brought that up. Ellen and Megan, follow-up question. What are you finding? What's the research telling us? I take the perspective of the book of Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun, but I do think there are different ways in which we can block the rays of the sun. And so what's your research telling you, the people you're working with, what are they saying? And then I want to kick something over to Mark, Tammy, and Sheena.
You want to go first this time, Megan?
Sure. You're asking, what are they saying about like the Great Resignation or teachers?
Yeah. What are you seeing from the work you do?
Yeah. Yes. From our vantage point, at this point, we've only kind of heard or seen in isolated incidences like teachers leaving en masse. But what's really interesting is our research tells us that a lot of teachers have intentions to leave, and that the intent for people to leave has increased since last fall and even last spring. And there is a lot of research and even internal Upbeat data that shows that intention to leave is actually predictive of leaving. And so we should have, I think we should be concerned about a fair number of teachers leaving the profession just based on what we ask a question on our survey. Do you plan to stay in your school for the following year? And so we've seen increasingly on every survey that question answered, with disagree or strongly disagree more often than in previous surveys. Yeah.
What pre-pandemic, what percentage of the respondents would have said what you just said?
Pre-pandemic, we have some data. We have not a common sample as much. We like to compare common samples, but we are increasingly taking on new clients. So our samples aren't always in common, but we just released a retaining Black teachers memo, which does compare pre-pandemic or last fall to this fall. And, it's gone up from, I believe, 11% to 18% of teachers saying they strongly agree or agree with the question, I intend to leave my school in the next year. And so we see that people who strongly agree with that question on average leave at 68%, like actually leave. So it's a pretty high correlation.
Thanks for sharing that, Ellen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would have classified teaching as a great resignation profession pre-pandemic because we always had teacher turnover rates of about 8%, which is triple or so the rate in some other countries. And so it's always been far too high and not higher than the turnover rate in comparable professions in the US. And it's always been a crisis for some kids, for the kids who were experiencing the teacher shortages, kids of color, kids in high poverty schools, special education kids. In the environment, the climate has bear the brunt of the ongoing STEM teacher shortage. And so it's been, in my mind, a crisis for time immemorial, really. And what we have right now is far worse. And then it's hopefully going to get us to the point where we are able to generate the collective will to turn around what's been problematic for so long. I'll just add that the data that I see the most is the data coming from the NEA. The 55% teachers plan to leave previously, when they otherwise weren't. 55% plan to leave prematurely because of COVID. And those numbers are higher for teachers of color. I think it was 63% for Black teachers and 59% for Latinx teachers. And then there's this debate in the field about, well, yeah, like they say they're going to leave, but are they really going to leave? And so, Megan, that was really helpful to hear that data on the predictiveness of intent to leave. But regardless of whether the attrition materializes, it's just so problematic to have so many teachers saying that they want to leave.
And Ellen, you also conduct research on salaries. From the public's perspective, billions of dollars going to schools. I've talked to people who say, well, great, teachers will stay now because they'll get more money. How do you respond to that question?
Well, I haven't heard that because I haven't heard of those dollars being directed in the ways that we would like to see toward teacher salaries. I think it still is kind of coming through how those billions of ESSER dollars are being directed. There's obviously just some priorities that were more immediately pressing at the start of the COVID pandemic, where you needed to be feeding students and providing the supplies for keeping schools clean and safe. But yeah, we've really been encouraging, along with the Secretary of Education and many others, districts and schools to use those funds for teacher salaries. I mean, that's what our whole mission is all about, increasing teacher salaries. But in our current context with the Great Resignation, there's data from RAND last year that showed that of those teachers who were planning to leave because of the pandemic, 64% said that that the pay that they received just wasn't worth the risk that they were taking on by teaching, and that was the highest rated challenge for teachers planning to leave.
Well, thanks for noting that.
And I could go on a whole lot more on salaries if you want.
No, well, thanks for noting that point, because many people in the general public who don't interact with colleagues like all of you, they believe that 80% of that money is going directly to teachers. I'm like, there's so many other layers. Building, health. Yeah, so you made that point. So Sheena and Mark, one of you, you've retired. You've got a different career, Florida. Talk to us. Did any of what we see right now in education play a role in you making your decision or not? And yeah.
Sheena, why don't you go first?
Well, for me, to be very honest, I had planned on teaching another 5 to 10 years. I never saw myself retiring now. I think it was a combination of the leadership issue that you already brought up. I also believe that the public's opinions of teachers had gotten so fierce that it filtered into the school day, either through the students, because now they're going to support whatever their parents' view is in the classroom, and then the pressure on the admin and those above them all filtered down into the classroom. I've spent a lot of time reflecting since I left the classroom. And initially I thought, it's just burnout. I'm just, the stress of the last couple of years, that's what it is. But as I really have dug deeper and deeper, I don't think that's it. I think I got to the point where I felt like I was failing daily. I'd always been able to keep my students safe. And for the first time in my career, I couldn't do that. And I couldn't keep them safe from the virus. I couldn't keep them safe from the policies that were being put in place or the policies that were in place that weren't being followed. I could not keep them safe from each other with the different political views coming into the classroom. And I think that is what took a toll on me to where I felt that I could not perform my job to the level that I needed to in order to have an impact.
And thank you for opening up your personal story to that.
Took me out of the classroom.
Wow. And all the years of experience, the knowledge, the wisdom that moves along with that.
And I still want to work with children. I haven't found my place yet. Okay. I'm floundering a little bit because for almost 40 years of my life, school has really scheduled the rest of my life. It's been the force that I scheduled everything around that. So I'm floundering a little bit. I do plan on working with children still. I am advocating for education on many levels, but I recently came to the conclusion that that's what it really was. My passion for kids didn't change. My passion for my content area did not change. My belief in public education did not change. I could not keep my children safe.
Thank you.
That was important.
Mark.
So my pathway to my latest decision is a very interesting one. I started my educational career as a high school senior after having been asked by my church to teach the 8th grade CCD class because nobody else would, because who else teaches 8th graders? And I grew through lenses of leadership into becoming a teacher, into becoming a principal, into becoming a district level administrator, into working for the state of Wisconsin. And every opportunity I had, I looked at as this is one more way to impact more and more people positively, whether those were students or teachers or communities. And so I kept that lens focused throughout my entire career. And I started my official teaching career post-college in 1993. So I still consider myself a teacher, even though I work in the private sector now. So my wife and I were presented an interesting opportunity. Our youngest went to college. My wife is a superintendent of schools in Wisconsin. I worked for the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, and suddenly we were empty nesters. And she was recruited to come into a position with a national school communications firm. And they wanted somebody to go to Florida. And so we kind of jumped at it. So that took our family to Florida. And I jumped at the chance to go back to being an assistant principal. And some people kind of laughed because they're like, Mark, what are you doing? You've gone through all these stages. Why do you want to go back into the classrooms? Why do you want to go back into a building? And I said, because I want to finish my career applying all of the things I've learned over my almost 30-year career at this point. And I want to go to a place that needs me and wants me. And I was very proud to spend the last year working as an assistant principal. And it's the work that I did with families of poverty, families experiencing generational and situational poverty, families who were experiencing homelessness and transience. It's that work that got me noticed by my current employer, Tropicana Brands Group. They looked at me and said, you have tremendous skill in connecting people, and you have tremendous skill in advocating for families and advocating for what's right. And we want to offer you a position to still do some of that work. So I'm very fortunate. My current role is basically still being a teacher. My students are adults, and so I'm learning the manufacturing side of the world in manufacturing orange juice and how work with adults and supporting them can really change. Doing things the way we do when we're really good teachers, but doing it in a manufacturing environment completely changes the way adults behave and perform. And that gets back to some of the earlier comments on recognition. And I tend to think of recognition as not just the shiny trophy on the shelf, but there's somebody who is in your life as a supervisor or a peer or even a subordinate who sees you and knows you and cares about your story and cares enough to invest in you. And that's what I get to do now. So instead of working with the kids who would hop out of a car and hug me in the morning and go into class, I'm now working with their families. I'm building pipelines for families to have financial security so they don't have to go and move jobs just to have a living wage. I'm working with families to take those who are unskilled laborers and developing relationships with higher education institutions to train them in manufacturing practices and skilled trades. And so when I do that, that improves the lives of my children. And so today it's national, so it's almost the last day of National Teacher Appreciation Week. So I made good on my promise to bring orange juice back to my building. And so I took 200 bottles of orange juice back because tomorrow is Orange You Glad to Be a Teacher. And I am so proud to be able to keep those connections going and keep that relationship going so that everybody sees that there is something that they can grow into and learn from and go to. And I am still a teacher. I just have a very different classroom.
Thank you. This one's for Tammy, then one for Daniel. So Tammy, we knew families in urban and rural communities had a number of challenges. You're in a special type of learning environment where you are in New Mexico. Talk to us about what that was like. And then Daniel, when she's done, you work and have worked with elementary school students for years. We often overlook the impact on young people. I mean, really young people. Would like you to talk about your role working with them and how it's also helped or influenced what you're doing now. We'll start with you, Tammy.
All right. Well, so interestingly enough, like I said, I've been teaching at all the different school levels at the elementary, high school, and middle school. So when the pandemic first hit, I was actually doing special education at the high school level. And I do, like I said, I live on a reservation. The connectivity is not that great, so hopefully you can still hear me right now. But at that time, especially, okay, good. At that time, especially, a lot of the students didn't have laptops, didn't have internet. And so we, just like everybody else, we were all thrown in to a situation that we didn't know what to, it was new. But teachers we're always dealing with that, right? The sprinkler goes off and floods your room, and things happen all the time. And we, as teachers, that's part of what we're used to. We shift, we flow, we bend and move, to fit the needs of our students. And so it was just on a greater level that we did that, or that we had to do that. And the way I ended up handling that was really unique and interesting. And not everybody, even in my community, knows that I did this, but we were supposed to start doing online teaching, but like I said, we also were doing packets. And I would, when I was going around delivering packets to some of my students at their houses, in the car, I'd roll down the window, and then some students would be like, "Hey, can you just help me with this one thing?" And I'd be like, "All right, sure." Well, it turns out I ended up actually calling, like I said, this was at the very beginning of the pandemic. And I ended up calling a lot of my parents that I worked with and saying, "Hey, would it be okay if I just came and sat in the driveway to help your student because they're not able to access the teacher's stuff online?" And they all said yes. And I ended up going driveway to driveway, and I sat in my car, or we sat distanced apart with a laptop on a little cardboard box, or just, the paperwork, the packets, calculators. I had basically a mobile classroom that I was using to help my students. And, but that, like I said, that was just at the end of the high school that I was working with. And then I actually got transferred to the middle school for the next year. So I did the my entire first year of middle school online. So I didn't get the full experience of middle school students, but that had it's all of its own challenges, as everybody here can attest to the challenges of online teaching. we were talking about appreciation, and I think that one thing that came out of online teaching was really the reminder that as tech as our world is, there is nothing like the human component. And so most of us, I think that, our teachers, one of the main reasons we do it is for the building of the relationships that we foster, and that are the rewards for us. And so there's always a balance, of do the rewards outweigh the challenges? And so everyone that I've talked to that talks about leaving, or that has left, or that are leaving the profession, it's never about money. It's really about self-care, and about I don't think there's nobody that I know that has lost a passion for kids or for teaching itself. I think it just becomes, like I said, the challenges and the pandemic and teaching online really magnified those challenges, I think. But then also some of the rewards were missing during that year, because, or we would just celebrate, oh my gosh, I had a student that said here on the chat, it was like, you had to celebrate the tiniest things. And so I know I'm going a little bit around in circles, but as far as I am still teaching 20 years into it, and I used to think that I could do it forever. And, but to be real, it is getting to where sometimes that balance doesn't feel like, I'm not sure how much longer I can last, because the rewards are always there with kids, but ultimately, am I taking care of myself? And sometimes teaching, I've heard some friends or colleagues refer to it like an abusive relationship, that they continue with when just agreeing to more and more demands, but not actually taking care of ourselves and our own mental health and physical health. So
that's a tough but real analogy. Let me kick it over to Daniel. Then after that, Peggy, I'll come to you, and I've got one for Kareem.
Okay. Basically, I live and breathe Eric Jensen, and he has a quote that I have kept in the back of my mind for 22 years. And that quote is that the one thing children of poverty lack and reach out for the most is a strong, stable, caring adult in their lives. And most often it's teachers that they turn to in order to fill that void. And I was teaching at a Title I school that was probably one of the toughest schools in our district. And it was really interesting in that every time they had a boy that was a problem, they would bring him to my classroom and say, we're going to transfer him over. And what I learned was that these boys did not have a positive male role model. If they even had a male at home, they didn't have that positive role model. I do remember one boy that they brought in. They brought him in because he was mentally abusing his 5th grade teacher. And when I found out, just talking to him, is that his dad said, it's okay to you're supposed to abuse women. So he was brought up in this environment. And so he was my project that year. And I told him, I said, this isn't the way things run, we have. And so I kind of took him under my wing, and he started to see how things were going, seeing the other way, and that there was another way to talk to females, and there was another way to treat them. And he ended up turning things around. I also had a gang leader brought into my classroom because he had such control over the class that he was in. If somebody would ask to sharpen a pencil, they would look over at him. And if he shook his head no, they would stay in their seat. So my principal said, I'm going to be bringing him over, and he's going to be finishing out the year in your classroom. So the day that he came to my classroom, I think he was expecting me just to jump on his case and just read him the riot act. But I just, put my hand out, shook his hand, and said, "Hey, welcome to the classroom. Come on in, man. I've got a desk over here for you, and let's get you all set up." And he really looked confused because he was expecting me to come across in a real terse tone with him. But I've been to the gang awareness seminars, and I learned that they're a lot of your gang members are they're lacking the support, and they're lacking the attention at home. So what they do is they turn to a gang for the support, and then they'll go out into the community, and they don't care if it's positive or negative attention they're getting attention. Mm-hmm. So when I started giving the positives, he ended up being one of my best students that year. He turned into an all-A student, but it was because he needed that positive role model. And I think that's what's really lacking at the lower grade levels right now, because we do have so many young gentlemen that they don't know where they're going home at night, or if they're going to go with their aunt or wherever. They don't have that positive role model. Their dads are either in prison or they're in gangs themselves. And so they don't know how to interact with society. And so by being a male and the option, hey, let's look at another way of doing this and come across in a calm, collective manner, a lot of them will turn it around. They really, really will. I've seen it happen time and time again where, when I was working at that elementary school, and they really built a big trust with me. I had one gentleman that I had a big garden there to school that I worked on the weekends with, and he kind of came up to the fence line. This was after he had left, and he had been kicked out of the house. And so I was talking to him. I said, "What are you going to do?" He said, "Well, I'm going to live on the street." I was like, "No, I don't think so." So I asked him if he had eaten, and he hadn't eaten since the night before. So I took him out to breakfast, and we sat and talked. And we talked about possibilities. We talked about the future, and so I was able to get him connected up with counselors. I was able to get him connected up with support agencies, and he was able to turn it around. But it's just that strong, stable, caring adult that they're looking for. They're reaching out for us, and I think that's what keeps me in the classroom. As tough as it's become, is that I know there's a story about a little boy that was throwing the starfish back in the ocean, and the guy was asking, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm saving starfish." He says, "Well, you can't save them all." Well, the little boy picked up a starfish and threw it. He says, "I just saved that one." And that's kind of the way I see it, is I'm saving that one. I can't save them all.
Thank you. Peggy, I know you're going to have to leave soon. You brought up leadership really quickly. Your board certified teachers are in leadership positions across the country, in the classroom, principal, superintendent, central office, State Department of Ed. What's one thing you're pretty proud of in terms of your leadership role in supporting your leaders during this time? And what recommendations should lawmakers and Department of Ed leaders think about doing differently to help leaders?
Well, I think one of the things is you let them lead. You listen to them because they are closest to the work, number one. And there are two words that come up for me all the time when I think about leaders, and one of them is autonomy and the other is support. You as a leader don't know everything, and therefore you can't make all the decisions by yourself, and nor should you. And if you think about, I think about what we did as an organization when the pandemic started, and we pivoted our entire organization, all of our work, to say we're going to focus on the needs of teachers so that they can focus on the needs of students. And it's like, if your cup is half empty, you can't fill anything. You have got to make sure you are taking care of the folks who are in front of children who are, experiencing everything you can imagine and more. I was lucky. I spent 38 years in a classroom and I loved every single minute of it. But I created my own school. So therefore, I could love every single minute of it. And, my heart goes out to individuals because we know what they're experiencing around the country. And it is sad in the sense that it's a simple solution, but not. And I say simple because listen to the folks who are doing the work, and complex because people are not doing that. So it's Teacher Appreciation Week, and to all of you and all of, the people who are in classrooms doing the hard work every day, I appreciate you so much. And want you to know that, it doesn't go unseen, it doesn't go unheard, it doesn't go unappreciated, the job that you do every day. So Sheena, there are children out there waiting for you.
Thank you. So Kareem, when we think about students with, take care, when we think about students, special education or students with special needs, we say roughly it's 10% of the public school population. I've always said I think that number is too low, but we'll go with the 10%. You're working with students who we often don't see or see pre-pandemic. Really didn't see them in unique ways during the pandemic. Someone with the level of experience that you have, what should the public know that you were doing that worked? And what are some things we who want to support you need to know to do to support teachers like you and others?
The thing that has always worked, it carried over to pandemic times, was building a strong classroom community. I think people, they think of student achievement in terms of like, oh, there's numbers or things like that. And when people come to my classroom, they feel the community that we have, and their top concern is not necessarily this academic achievement, right? And so what happened was when we then got online, and the parents of the students in my class saw that, they saw how much we all cared about each other. They were then stumping for my class. They were the ones who were leading the charge to say, hey, this school, we need to do more. We need classrooms like his all over the place. We need to pour the money into education and things like that. So the building up of community and classrooms like that are very important. It's very important in all classrooms. But what it does is then enable everybody to be free enough to try their hardest and not worry about making mistakes, to be vulnerable when their classmates are around, because they know their classmates are like their family, and they knew I was like their family. There was none of that. We were worried about what we were doing wrong. And the funny thing is, coming into pandemic, I didn't necessarily think I had the strongest relationship with all the parents in my class. Leaving it, I knew I did, because we spent so much time online together. And what that also did is then make me feel free enough with them to say, I think we need to do this one thing. And that might have been so difficult for me to talk about before, but since we built it, this vulnerability was broken, right? And then in terms of what people need to do on campuses, right? They need to not forget this population of learners, because we don't necessarily affect maybe test scores as much. And you're not going to be an A+ school just because your self-contained classes are doing well or something like that, right? The rating systems, I don't know how they do it in all states. But what happens when you build a true community on a campus, like our campus has it now, right? So now I feel like we then all understand each other. We don't feel like this is a place where maybe some people fit in. It's like, if we've taken the time out to do it with everyone, then we all know that we fit in somewhere, right? And so then, the band folks and the cheerleaders, and they all feel like, oh, this is just like home for everyone. But if you leave any part of the campus out, and even if it's just 3 self-contained classes in my building, we know that is not an inclusive environment, right? But when you make sure you do all the work to get everybody in, to not center anybody, you then know that it is inclusive environment, and you can all be yourself, and you can all give everything you have, right? And that's what I think I learned from the parents in my class over teaching COVID. It was like, I know I can give them everything now, because now we have that kind of relationship. I have now included all stakeholders, and I always did a great job in my classroom. I always did a great job at the Maryvale campus. Heck, I even did a great job in the city of Maryvale building community. But I was like, man, I hadn't had siblings and parents as strong of a part of the classroom as they were until that happened. And now I also am like, okay, we all have this freedom. The parents have this freedom to talk to me like oh, I don't have to worry about being buttoned up around it. Whatever it is, it is just, just building these communities help And building that inclusiveness helps everybody say, I can be my full self, I can be my true self. And that's the kind of stuff we need. That's also the kind of stuff you need to help people help you with movement. So when I'm saying then, hey, we need to go down to the Capitol today, everybody's coming, you know what I'm saying? Because we did that.
Excellent. Well, we're getting toward the end of our conversation, and what I want to give everybody an opportunity to do is just to share some thoughts before we close. Maybe something that you wanted to say you didn't get a chance to, maybe something you want to reply to something you've heard, or just something you want to say in general. In fact, I'll work backward this time. I'll start off with Megan, and then we'll move from there.
I think I'd just say to wrap up, it's been awesome to hear teachers' accounts and experiences today of why they're still in the classroom, what happened during the pandemic. It really, I think one of our domains on our survey around teacher engagement is teacher voice. And I think teacher voice is such an important thing to elevate, and being able to hear the experiences of teachers has been really great and a really nice thing during Teacher Appreciation Week. And I would just, say happy Teacher Appreciation Week to everyone here. And
like Megan, I mean, this has just been an absolute gift. I so appreciate during Teacher Appreciation Week to be able to hear from the educators on this call. It's been wonderful. And as you all were talking, I mean, everything to me so much comes back to salary. Tammy, I know you said it's never about the salary, the real, primary reason when people leave. It's about the self-care. But hearing you talk about self-care and hearing Dan talk about the positive role models and hearing Kareem talk about creating the strong classroom community and the stakeholder engagement, I just can't stop asking myself, well, how do we make that possible for every teacher to create those communities and be those role models and provide that self-care for themselves and that care for their students, when we know that 1 in 5 teachers are working second jobs during the school year? That rate is 3 times higher than other professions. And it just makes it impossible for so many teachers to be their best selves, and Sheena, to do what you feel you have to do to keep your students safe. And so, it just brings me back to this passion area of mine about how do we increase teacher salaries so that teachers don't have to be working those second jobs, so that they don't have to be worrying about supporting their families. We know that in 42 states, a 10-year teacher veteran who has a household of 4 is eligible for public benefit programs like food stamps. How do we take those worries, and as well as the time sucks that don't contribute to helping students away, so that teachers can do what they do best and be happy with the job?
Thank you for sharing great data, sobering data, I should say. Thank you. Tammy.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, I will just say that going back, since we were talking about pandemic quite a bit, just how much I realized after doing teaching online for a year, how much I realized when I went back into the classroom. And like I said, I was then put into a middle school. I absolutely loved it. And I never thought I would actually choose middle school. I had started my career with elementary, and but I got put into the middle school. And when I didn't even really fully realize it until I was talking, I would talk to friends and they'd say, how's it going at the middle school? And I would say, it's amazing how much I missed being around just the buzz and hum and energy of young people, and their dramas and what they love and what they hate and what they're embarrassed about and their awkwardness. And I hated being in middle school as a middle school student, but I loved being there at this end, being somebody who can see them and hear them and walk with them and understand them. And so that's still there. I will go back to what somebody mentioned earlier about administrators, and I heard the word listen, and speaking of how it's both simple and complicated. the simple word of listen. If I will say this on, we're being recorded, but if I had a choice between a higher salary and administrators that actually would just listen, I would choose administrators that would listen, honestly. Not that I'm saying I don't want a higher salary, but really, I think that I used to say if I won the lottery, I would still do what I do, maybe pay somebody to do the paperwork. But really, it's about it's a lot of it comes down to administrators that would listen, and especially in a place like where I live, that there is a very, very high turnover rate of teachers and administrators. In fact, especially administrators, that if some of the administrators coming in would take time to maybe question what's some strategies of the teachers that have been here and have built relationships with the community and are part of the community, maybe take some time to listen and see what works, and not just change everything that they think doesn't. So that's about it.
Thank you. Sheena.
Well, I want to respond to comments that have been made, and I'll try and be quick. Ellen, I have worked 2 to 4 jobs my entire career. I am a single parent. I could never live just on my salary, and I'm afraid they're going to dig me up from my grave to get the rest of my student loans. So I understand what you're talking about. I am living it, and I am in a state that has the WEP formula. So all those other jobs I've worked, when it's time for Social Security, I don't quite have the age yet, but when it's time, I won't get it all. So I will get maybe 40% of the 90% that I've earned from working all those other jobs. And that goes back to I've worked since I was 16. Kareem, the community, that is what broke my heart the most. I could not give my students that community and that safe place. For them to be who they were is so important. And all of a sudden, that was stripped. I just couldn't do it. And so when I'm talking about feeling like I was failing, that's what it was. It was not being able to give them that safe space to be who they were. And music has a way of doing that. And so when you cannot do that, that's a scary place to be in. And Tammy, when you said admin that would listen, I'd continue to work those 2 to 4 jobs if the admin would listen, because you're in there, you're with those kids, you know them inside out. And when the pandemic hit, I lost all of my music students. They put the kids in cohorts so they couldn't get their electives that they normally would have. And no one could listen to understand that a lot of times the kids I have are the kids that don't fit in anywhere else. And they could have avoided so much harm to the students if I could have gotten someone to listen. So happy Teacher Appreciation Week to everyone after I lay all that down. But I just wanted to respond because you're right on, you're spot on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Like I say, whenever I do professional development, community is sacred. Build it wherever you are, make it stronger if you already have one. It's the key to a lot of things. I think people have changed the world, usually start in a small area and every once in a while they move on to a really big area. And secondly, and lastly for me, since it is Teacher Appreciation Week, I want to remind teachers, we do really, really well at big up our students. We give the students all the props. And we actually do really well also kind of representing our profession, right? It's like teaching, education, blah, blah, blah is the most important thing. All of that, obviously I agree with, but we don't do the greatest job in talking about our individual teachers who we know, love, and do a great job. I was looking posts throughout this week, teacher appreciation posts. I was one of the people who posted a few times. And when I posted about individual people. These teachers are amazing, that teacher's amazing, that teacher's amazing. And people are still, it's the same kind of thing. Teachers are the greatest, education's the greatest. Doing this for the kids, blah, 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 blah. We need to find a way to start hyping up ourselves so that maybe people will follow on and say, yeah, maybe we should be talking about teacher all the time, not just Teacher Appreciation Week, of course, but show some love to some individual teachers too.
Thank you. Daniel.
Mine will be short and sweet. To whoever's listening, we're teachers, we're professionals. We're in the classroom prepping long before most Americans have even had their first cup of coffee. We're in the classroom preparing for the next day or reviewing or making a lesson plan better when most people are finishing up dinner at night. We are there for our kids. We go to ballet recitals, we go to band concerts, we go to football games, we go to anything we can to show our kids that we support them. We're advocates for our kids. We stand up for our kids and we will fight to defend them tooth and nail. We're partners. We're partners with the business community. We're partners with parents and we're partners with community. And we work our hardest to bring everybody into that envelope and to work together to make our kids successful. But what I'd like everybody to remember is we're also human. We have feelings and we really care. And so not only for a Teacher's Appreciation Week, but just, when you see that teacher walking down the hallway, when you're picking your kid up, look in their eyes, look at the pain that they're suffering from, a kid that's just not getting it. Look at how tired they are and they're still moving on. And just a pat on the back and a thank you, boy, that would do wonders. That would just do so much more than all these gifts that we're getting for Teacher Appreciation Week.
So a few years ago, in our Wisconsin Teacher of the Year program, we pivoted from saying we were seeking out excellence to saying we were seeking out excellence as seen through impact, honoring context, really recognizing the individuality and the individual context and role and impact of a teacher and how those individual relationships and individual contexts drove to positive results. And so what I want to remind teachers of at Teacher Appreciation Week is to say, don't doubt your greatness. Don't ever doubt your greatness. You have skills in social emotional learning. You have skills in leadership and in teaching, in communications, in advocacy, in problem solving that are incredible. Very few people, and the pandemic taught us this, very few people can do what a teacher can do. But I'll tell you what, teachers, you can do a lot of what other people can do. And don't ever doubt the depth and breadth and potency of your skills as leaders, as humans. Know that we're always looking at you as seeing your excellence through your impact and honoring your context in which you work. And thank you, teachers, for doing what you do every day.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you, Mark, for also showing public-private partnership in reverse. Usually it's public-private partnership. You now reversed it, working for a private company to do public good. So thank you for continuing your work in education. Daniel, thank you for your work. We know 20% of the teaching force are men. Most of those men are not in elementary school. And you made a really interesting point about the importance of having a stable adult role model in a situation, particularly for some young boys who are looking for a man to be in that place. You also brought something about gangs. There's a superintendent here in Virginia who spoke at the Virginia Education Summit some months ago. He said one gang leader told him that the pandemic was the best recruiting tool he's ever seen, because being out of school, they were able to recruit. So thank you for giving others who are dealing with the same thing examples on how to do it. Kareem, thank you not only for the work that you do, but for talking about how you work with your parents, and now you're both champions for your children, not competitors for their time. And you're right about the Capitol. As someone who's gone to Capitol with placard cards and everything else, that kind of stuff matters. And knowing you can call on your families now is important. Sheena, thank you for the 40 years in education. And you say you're floundering, that's okay. Floundering only means the water's coming and you'll be able to swim again. When you think about the children in Israel, the children of Israel, 40 years in the desert, you're going to come out and get to the promised land. And so I'm sure we're going to find a way to make that happen. Tammy, thank you for being a wonderful example of what I call soul to soul. SOLE, you putting your soul, your foot in your shoe, putting that soul to a pedal and a brake to drive to where your children live, to speak to their other soul, SOUL. Because you went, I would say beyond, but you know you're doing what teachers do. And so that soul-to-soul example of meeting families and teachers where they are is a great example. Ellen, thank you so much for bridging theory and practice, research and best practices and ideas. Oftentimes we go from the gut is great, but you're telling us with data, here's what I see and here's where we go. And thanks for putting in context not only salary and retention, but things we have to think about. Megan, thank you for being a good example of a social entrepreneur. You know, James Hunter, the founder of our institute, talks about moral ecology and the role that schools have, but the role that other stakeholders have along the way. We need social entrepreneurs doing the kind of work you're doing to help influence not only policy and practice, but also the work that we do. Like all of you, I want to say a special thank you on National Teacher Appreciation Week. Thank you to all of our teachers, but I also want to take a quick moment to thank the teachers who 30 years ago, like me, I was a fifth grade teacher in Los Angeles, but thousands of us this time weren't in school because the verdict in the Rodney King riot, or Rodney King verdict, led to riots in Los Angeles. We were out of school at this time. And those teachers played a tremendous soul-to-soul impact on families and children that people hardly ever see. This is the 30th anniversary of it, not like the pandemic, but just want to give a shout out to them because doing another type of social distancing in the city, those teachers played a tremendous role that people overlook. And so special appreciation to them moving forward. I want to thank Catherine for her work of bringing us together. And with that, I want to thank all of you for the work that you do in the classroom, listening audience. We've got information on how to find our wonderful educators here, and we look forward to the next conversation. Thank you, everyone.